Hey guys, it's Amber from Notable Ink, and I'm excited to share 4 amazing ways to use stencils. I've been using stencils a lot lately. They're a really inexpensive craft product that has so many opportunities to get completely different looks. Did you know you could create prints with alcohol markers? This video is part of an Altenew blog hop, so follow the link below to enter to win a prize. If you're new to my channel, I'd love it if you subscribe, and as always, supplies will be listed down below. I'm going to start off with the Altenew Woven Stencil, and I'm going to be doing some dry embossing. Now, on the right, I have a piece of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, and on the left, I have a piece of Savoy 100% cotton letterpress paper. I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it's much thicker. It's about 140 pounds. It's really heavyweight, and because it's a letterpress paper, it's really great for dry embossing. Sometimes what I find with Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, whether you're using 80 pounds and especially 110 pounds, is that when you run it through to dry emboss it, it can crack. With a letterpress paper, you're less likely to get that. So I have my Sizzix Big Shot here, and I'm using the bottom platform, so just the base platform. I have 2 spellbinders. First I have the cutting plate. Then I have 2 spellbinders embossing pads. Those are soft embossing pads that I'll show you in a minute. I have a piece of the letterpress paper, the stencil, and then I'm going to put a cutting plate on top and run that through the die cut machine. I run it through in both directions just to make sure I get a good impression. Typically I don't tape the stencil to my paper because sometimes I've had the tape impress upon the paper, so I want to make sure I get a good impression so that I don't have to refit the stencil in place. Here you can see it's beautiful, there's no cracks, and it dry embossed beautifully, so you can see it from both sides. Sorry about the ink underneath my fingernail. I've had a full day of crafting already. So here are the 2 pads, and I find I get a better impression if I use both of them. If you're looking for a less intense dry embossing, you could just use one of the pads. So again, that's cutting plate, both of the embossing pads. Then I have the paper, the stencil, and then another cutting plate, and I run that through on the base plate of the Sizzix Big Shot. Here I have the leaf bed stencil, and so that was our first technique, was dry embossing. We're going to elevate the dry embossing by adding some direct ink to stencil. So I'm going to take Altenew Volcano Lake ink and put that directly onto the stamp set. Or sorry, not the stamp set, the stencil. And then I'll also add some olive ink, kind of just pouncing that around. And then I'm going to spray this with some water. I want to make sure that these colors blend together. Right now they're pretty individual. The ink isn't really dispersed, it's not too blended. So I'm going to spritz this with a few sprays of water. I'll quickly clean up the surface so I don't make a mess. And then I'm going to bring the Big Shot back and I'm going to run this through. I'm going to put a piece of scrap paper down just so I don't get any ink on my embossing pads. I have another piece of the letterpress paper. I'm going to gently lay the stencil directly on top of the letterpress paper with the ink down towards the paper. I'll put the cutting plate on top and I will run this through twice just like last time, so forward and backward. And this time it's going to impress, well actually I'm going to do it 4 times. I don't know why. I don't think that's necessary, you guys. So this time it's going to impress the ink, which is going to have a little bit of a watercolor look onto the paper. So here you can see you have not only dry embossing, but you also have this beautiful watercolor look, which was really easy to create, you guys. Super, super easy. I trimmed down the leaf bed panel and I'm going to wrap it with a little bit of this hemp teak twine. So I'm going to run that around. I'll just kind of tie it down with a little bit of purple tape. I'll go around 3 or 4 times and then I'll tie a little bit of a bow and I just glue that on with some art glitter glue. I'll trim the tails, and then what I want to do is put some sticky back fun foam on the back, but avoid the areas where the twine is. This is going to create a track so that it lifts up the rest of the card panel so that the twine has a place to go. This will allow the panel to lay flat on the woven piece without being bunched up because of the twine. I stamped a sentiment from Altenew Circled Sentiments and also added some enamel dots, the Seashore Color and Tropical Forest. I love how that turned out. Moving on to the next card, we have another new stencil. This is the Sphere Stencil, and I'm going to do a similar technique for the first part. So I'll do some direct ink to stencil here. We'll go ahead and dry emboss this. This time I'm using Warm Sunshine and Marigold. And so basically what I'm creating here is I wanted to have a bit of a sunset scene. Very modern though, I guess you can't really call it a scene, but I'm creating a sunset. So I wanted to have a gradient to this. So I wanted to have the lighter yellow at the top, some darker orange at the bottom. I'm just adding a little bit more of the Warm Sunshine to the top. And then I want to make sure that I clean up my edges because all of this is going to be touching the paper. So if you have extra ink around the edges, that's going to get on your paper. So I'm gently putting this down on a piece of A2 size, that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 letterpress paper. I'm gonna gently flip this over super slow to make sure I don't move the stencil at all. So I'll go ahead and get this adhered down. This time I am a little bit nervous about running it through without it being attached. We'll run this through to dry emboss, so that's going to create a print and also the three-dimensional texture. This time I did not spray this with water, you guys, so this is literally just a print just directly from the ink. So it won't have that watercolored look, but you can see how beautifully that turned out. So my edges are pretty clean. And then I went ahead and put that back in place, which is pretty easy to do because the edges are raised. You can just wiggle it into place. And I'll do some ink blending with Persian Blue and Midnight Violet. And this is one of the Altenew large blending tools here, and I love it. The whole brush is flat, so all of it contacts the paper, and you can just really get a smooth look. I really enjoy ink blending on this letterpress paper. It almost gives you like an airbrushed appearance. So here you can see the effect there. So you have the 4 different colors with the gradient effect, and I tried to, shade it so that it would look like an orb, but it's also raised, so you can't see that as well in the photos and on video. But in person, it has such a textile feel to it, and it just makes the receiver think, how did she do that? The die cut Hello is from Bold Greetings die set, and the sentiment is from Cinnamon Strips, and it's die cut with Featured Sentiments die set. Moving on to the Mighty Corners Stencil. This is a great stencil. If you didn't see Aram's post for the Altenew Educator Hop, she did a great card with this stencil, so be sure to check that out. So I'm going to color directly on the stencil with 3 different colors of artist markers. I'll use Cosmic Berry, Emerald, and Olive markers. So what I wanted to do was create a print with this, but it would have been really difficult to try and get my ink pads cleanly on each one of these stripes or chevrons without masking. And I didn't want to do any masking. I don't know. I don't love masking. If you follow me, you know that. So I thought it'd be much easier to use markers. So what I have here is a piece of A2 size. This is the letterpress paper, and I just marked the center. I'm going to spray this with a little bit of alcohol just to re-wet the marker because the marker is going to dry really fast. I'm just going to press this down on the center of the stencil there. I'll press it down just with my fingers. And then I'm going to go ahead and tape it so I have a little bit of a hinge because I want to make sure before I completely take this off that all of it is inked up. So I'll use a scratch piece of paper just to press that down. I'll lift this up with the hinge tape. And I can see there's a small part on the green that didn't transfer great. I wanted a little bit more color there. So I'm going to go ahead and spray it again with alcohol to re-wet the alcohol ink, and then I'll just press this down again. And I can tell from where the ink is coming through the back of the stencil where the card needs to go, but for the most part, it's in the right place because of that hinged piece of tape. So go ahead and peel this off, and then we've got a beautifully colored print. For the sentiments, I'll use Hello and Hugs die set, and I die cut Hello from 110-pound black cardstock. That just means I have to cut less of them because it's a thicker cardstock. And I'll stamp a sentiment from Sentiment Strips 2 with Obsidian Pigment ink. I'll go ahead and glue on the die cut and this card will be done. I love how this turned out. If you don't have alcohol markers or artist markers, you could try to use maybe some watercolors or even your ink pads on a wet brush and put that on the stencil and maybe dry emboss it like we did the first couple cards. But I thought it was fun to use the alcohol markers and really easy to apply that ink quickly. Be sure to like and subscribe and use that blog link down below so that you don't miss any inspiration along the hop. Leave a comment on my blog to enter the giveaway. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, liking, and ringing that bell so you don't miss any new inspiration. Here's a couple more videos for you before you leave, and I'll see you real soon.